The next topic that we're going to cover is how to detoxify your body. And the first recommendation we're going to make to you is sweat. Sweat a lot. Use a sauna if you can access one, and exercise every day, and work up a sweat. And Joe will explain why sauna detoxification is so important and how effective it is.
Okay, so I want to back up just a little bit and point to my book over here. Let's see, how do I point? There we go. There's my book, The Toxin Solution, because I actually take people on a journey on how to get toxins out of your body. And the first thing is stop exposing yourself to toxins. I know detoxification diets are really popular right now, and that's fine. But the problem with these detoxification protocols, if you're still putting toxins into your body, what are you actually accomplishing? So you've got to learn how to avoid toxins. Now, the next step is, now let's get these toxins out of the body as much as possible. And we do that both through direct measures to get the toxins out, and also through, might say, indirect measures where we support the body's own mechanisms for getting rid of toxins. Turns out one of the great ones is sweating. There's some great research done by Dr. Stephen Genuis up in Edmonton, Alberta. And he took kind of regular people, put them in a sauna, scrape off their sweat, see what's in the sweat, and was quite surprised to see huge amounts of metals, like cadmium, for example, huge amounts of chemicals like bisphenol A's and PCBs and things of this nature. And what was particularly interesting, he found toxins in the sweat that were not in the blood or the urine. So these toxins were so problematic for the body, it sequestered them away, put them in the fat to try to just get them out of circulation, stop damaging the body. So once we've got this mechanism of detox functioning with sweating is really effective. Now the body says, oh, great, we got a way to get rid of these things. Let's get rid of them. So sweating is really important. Now, the question is, how much do you have to sweat and for how long? I've looked at a lot of research on this, and it's very clear that the longer you sweat and the more you sweat, the more toxins are eliminated. In general, you need to sweat fairly freely for about 20 minutes. And once you get into 20 minutes of good sweating, that's when all your toxins are coming out. So I recommend to people sweat at least 20 minutes, at least once a week. But when you look at the research on sweating and disease, it's quite remarkable. So this research was done in Finland, and they compared people who sweated once a week to people who sweated 4 times a week, 4 to 7 times a week. Now notice, we're not comparing people who don't sweat to people who sweat, okay? So the results will be even more dramatic. So you look at this, look, people sweated once versus 4 to 7 times a week. What they found was not only an increase of longevity, but they found things like a 40% reduction in Alzheimer's disease. Right, dementia. Huge epidemic right now. People who do saunas can decrease their risk of dementia by 40%, decrease heart attacks by 1/3. They looked at disease after disease. They all go down when people sweat. So sweating is really helpful. And it doesn't matter whether it's saunas, it doesn't matter whether you're running and sweating profusely. What counts is sweating.
Also, the bone health connection here, well, there's actually two. If you don't clear out those toxins, they'll promote inflammation. That will activate osteoclasts and promote bone loss. And the other bone health connection is that exercise is what activates osteocytes, which are the most prevalent type of cell inside your bones. And osteocytes are the cells that trigger the whole process of bone renewal. When you exercise, you put stress on your muscles tighten, they put stress on your bones. And so your osteocytes become active, and they start the bone strengthening process, which means they start building new bone for you. This doesn't happen when you don't exercise. So it's really important to exercise. I urge you to try to get an hour worth of exercise every day. It doesn't have to be a formal exercise class or whatever. You can take a walk, you can do gardening, you can dance around your kitchen while you're cooking your own food. There's lots of ways, house cleaning can count as exercise, but just Move, don't just sit. So the next recommendation we have for you is to eat plenty of fiber. And Joe can explain why that is so important.
So I'm talking to my students about how to promote health. I have kind of a three-stage process. Number one is stop the damage. Whatever's causing damage to the body, stop doing it. So we talked one of the other ones about the kidneys. So there was a study that was done where they looked at people with kidney failure. They had an EGFR below 30. In this particular group, they were 12. Okay, and so when people's kidney function is that low, they need dialysis and kidney transplant. So what they decided to do with this group of people is to say, well, what damages the kidneys? Oh, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs and acetaminophen. So for 6 months, let's just have people stop the damage by stopping these agents. And they found in 6 months that the EGFR over doubled. So I use that as an example. The body has tremendous ability to heal if we just stop the damage. The second step is, now, how do we help the body's normal processes work? And I'll get into that, and that's what we're going to talk about in a second. And then the third part is, okay, if those first two steps aren't enough, now let's get into intervention. Let's go back to step 2. So as we evolved as a species, we had to develop a lot of detox systems. Because you go out and look at the plants we eat, like cabbage family foods. They're high in these sulfur compounds. They're actually pretty toxic. So we developed enzyme systems for detoxifying them. And we ate some fish, and fish is high in mercury. So we developed some mechanisms for getting rid of mercury. They're not great, but they're there. But key to so many of these detox processes is the liver transforming these molecules and dumping them in the gut to go out in the stool. Now, as those processes were developed, as we evolved as a species, we're consuming 100, 150 grams of fiber a day. Now, the average person only consumes 15 to 20 grams of fiber a day. So the fiber's not there to bind to the toxins being dumped into the gut, so they're reabsorbed into the body through something called enterohepatic recirculation. So if there's not enough fiber there, you can't get rid of the toxins, or I should say they're much more difficult to get rid of. Let me give you one example. There was a really good animal study on this, so I was really excited about. And I kept looking for human studies. I finally found one single human study, and it was done on a single individual. Okay, so I wish there was more done, but you can understand why this was a concern. So what they did was they looked at mercury. And they found that when they subjected animals to mercury and then looked at the rate at which they're excreting the mercury, they found that if they made the animal's diet deficient in fiber, when they got rid of the mercury in the gut, they just reabsorbed it. So there's a study on humans, and in this human, and it showed the same numbers as with the animal study. So the humans excretes 1% of the body load of mercury every day. That sounds good. Oh, we get rid of mercury pretty quickly. But then through enterohepatic recirculation, we reabsorb 99% of the mercury we just dumped. So why would our smart bodies waste all that metabolic energy? By the way, glutathione is binding to the mercury to get out into the gut. There's no example why glutathione is so important. So we have all this metabolic work to bind glutathione to the mercury, get out through the gut, and reabsorb it. Well, reabsorb it because there's no fiber there. So we can support the natural healing process of the body with no side effects whatsoever, simply by having people eat the amount of fiber we need to, what our bodies were evolved to require.
Yeah, I posted a tweet on this a few weeks ago. The average intake of a really important type of fiber called resistant starch in the United States in adults is 1.9 grams a day. And the recommendation for that, which is already too low, is 15 grams a day. Resistant starch is just a really important fiber. It helps with insulin sensitivity. It helps with cholesterol. It helps prevent cancer and chronic kidney disease. It acts as a prebiotic in the large intestine, so it increases the levels of friendly bacteria there. And it lowers inflammation through a whole bunch of processes. If that's not enough to inspire you to want to eat more foods that are rich in resistant starch increases fat oxidation by a lot, 32%, compared with other forms of starch. So resistant starch can help you lose excess fat. And the best food sources of resistant starch are green bananas, because as a banana ripens, the starch changes to a regular starch. Beans, peas, lentils, white beans and lentils are the highest in resistant starch. And then whole grains, especially oats, barley, and brown rice. Rice contains more accessible resistant starch when it's been cooked and then cooled. So you cook it, put it in the refrigerator, and then eat it later. And then potatoes also provide more resistant starch when they're cooked and cooled. So you can make potato salad and get lots of healthy resistant starch for yourself. Okay, the third recommendation we're going to make is that you stop using health and beauty aids that pollute you. And I'll let Joe give you his advice on that.
So the problem with health and beauty aids ranges from kind of subtle problems to really overt problems. So the good news is that we rarely are in the overt area anymore. But remember in the past, women would use lead-containing products to lighten their skin. Okay. Now that's, I won't get into our very social norms and mores about what is beautiful, what's not beautiful. But the reality is that a lot of cosmetics over the centuries have been full of really toxic compounds. The good news is that most of those aren't there anymore. The bad news is that we put in some other compounds. Now, when people are using health and beauty aids, they almost always want them to smell nice. So we put in fragrances and phthalates to solubilize and stabilize those fragrances. And those phthalates get into our bodies when we put them on the skin. I know when I was in medical school, naturopathic medical school, we were taught, the skin is fairly impermeable. The body's pretty good at controlling what gets into the body. Well, now we know the skin is actually quite permeable. And where you put on the skin is likely to get into the body. So then you look at health and beauty aids, look at phthalate levels. Remember, phthalates bind to some receptor sites and increase people's risk of diabetes. That's why they're being called diabetogens. So if you look at a person consuming, utilizing no health and beauty aids whatsoever, and you look at their phthalate levels, they're actually fairly low. Of course, assuming they're not being exposed to plastics a lot. But then as you add lotion, antiperspirants, mouthwash, hair gel, when you think of all these things people use, looking at I'll quote one study, looked at, I think it was 30 young men, and basically they had them not use any health and beauty aids, and then they had one health and beauty aid at a time. When they had 7 health and beauty aids added to 6 health and beauty aids to these people, and by the way, the average male uses 6 health and beauty aids a day. The average woman uses 12. So using all those 6 health and beauty aids, they had 300 times the level of phthalates in their body. Not 300%, 300 times as much. So what was happening with that? Well, they're binding to some receptor sites, so they're more susceptible to diabetes, and they're also binding to testosterone receptor sites. So the men who are trying to look and smell nicer for the sexual attractiveness have actually made themselves less manly if you decide to define testosterone as manliness.
Right. So the good news on this is there are health and beauty aids that you can use. I certainly do, that are clean. They're not going to pollute you. You can use the Environmental Working Group guides, ewg.org. They have guides that will help you find clean products. You can also download an app called Think Dirty, which is an app that you can scan a product with, and it'll tell you if it's contains a lot of things you don't want in your body or not. And we'll provide a link for the Environmental Working Group guides and for Think Dirty. And I think we've now given you a lot of things you can think about doing. You certainly don't have to do them all at once, but if you try to implement a couple of these things over the next few months, you'll greatly decrease your toxin load and greatly decrease the inflammation that these toxins cause that then activate osteoclasts too much and contribute to bone loss. And you'll also just improve your health overall in many ways. So we hope this has been helpful and that you'll try some of these things and let us know what you think. Thanks so much. Bye.